The finale of She-Hulk aired last week, and we need to talk about it.
This retro react is a year later, though from my vantage. I took the time to watch She-Hulk, and honestly, it wasn't that bad, so I wanted to make a big stink about this because I'll defend what no one else will apparently. I mean, I actually liked the Birds of Prey movie for starters.
Now, I'm sure the writers and creators of this masterpiece are at this very moment high-fiving each other.
It's been a year and this show wasn't received that great, so honestly, I doubt that.
Ecstatic about their victory over the racist and sexist people of the world. But I have bad news for them. No matter how much Disney and Marvel try to bribe and manipulate every statistic, She-Hulk was not a success.
It did better than some of their other Disney Plus Marvel shows, but ultimately it received middling reviews. At this point, honestly, I think Disney's strategy for both Marvel and Star Wars is to throw whatever they make at the wall and hope to God it sticks.
And if it gets a second season, it will be simply because of Marvel's continued desire to show disdain towards their own fan base.
It's reportedly not getting a second season. The star of the show has even alluded to not reprising the role anytime soon. It's in the air for now.
So in this video, we're going to talk about why She-Hulk sucks. Let's start with the most obvious. Jennifer Walters is not likable.
What isn't likable about her? I hate having to use this argument, but if this character was a man, people would have zero problems with her depiction in this series. I mean, her male counterpart would be a mixture of Bruce Banner and Matt Murdock, which is quite frankly who the character she plays is.
Now, I've never read the comic books.
It's okay, no one else has either.
But from what I can tell, the She-Hulk comic was popular.
Spider-Man and the X-Men are usually the breadwinners when it comes to the popular selling Marvel comics. She-Hulk's sales are middling at best, with a lot of her solo runs getting cancelled. Comics don't sell that well in general. At one point, the manga for Demon Slayer outsold the entire American comic book industry. It's really hard finding comic sales data if I'm being honest, otherwise I'd throw up a bunch of charts and stuff here.
And for many, one of their favorite characters. A far cry from the reception the show's title character has received.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
And rightly so, might I add.
No.
She-Hulk, or Jen, right off the bat comes off as dismissive, self-obsessed, and immature.
I just want to say before we go further into this, I think the writers intentionally skipped a lot of the training stuff because of the show being 9 episodes long. So instead of her learning to use her powers for several episodes, they relegated it to 1, which might make it look like she's dismissive of the Hulk, but really she's just adapting to her situation better than he did. I can't quite call her self-obsessed because she does care about other characters throughout the show, frequently calling Bruce to keep in touch with him. She even hires her paralegal from a different law firm to a better law firm and gets her a better job. She also saves people. I wouldn't call her immature either, since she does her job and instead of wanting to be a superhero, would rather just be a salary woman.
Just trying to show you how it's done.
I'm shown.
She complains about not being respected by her male peers in her field of expertise.
The show does tell you that her male peers don't respect her. She's not just saying that just to say it. It literally happens in like the first 5 minutes of the show.
But then turns around and completely marginalizes Bruce's experience as a Hulk and is already convinced of her own superiority despite being a Hulk for a couple of hours.
I think this argument of her marginalizing Bruce's experiences is horribly misinterpreted by every review I've seen of this show. At no point does She-Hulk ever say, "Your experiences aren't valid." She never does that. She does learn from Bruce. He teaches her how to use her powers, as well as how to change to end from being a Hulk. I think what these reviewers are conflating here is that she says as a woman it's easier to suppress your rage, which pissed a lot of male viewers off for some reason. That is not her saying, "Your experiences as the Hulk don't matter." That is her saying that she's had to deal with having to control her anger working in a male-dominated field.
She completely lacks any humility and can't even consider that maybe, just maybe, Bruce could teach her something.
I don't understand this argument at all. He literally teaches her how to shapeshift from being regular Jen into her Hulk self. He teaches her how to use her powers, Where the differences lie between Jun and Bruce are in how they want to use their powers. Jun doesn't care about being a hero. She just wants to be a lawyer. But Bruce doesn't agree with that sentiment.
Instead, she insults him and belittles all the struggles he's been through.
So I don't know if the reviewer here is intentionally lying or not, but that does not happen in the show. What Jun and Bruce are arguing about is how Jun should implement her Hulk powers. He wants her to isolate herself and use her powers to save the world. She does not want to do that.
My life wasn't taken away.
Really? Oh, so you didn't wind up alone? Hiding away on some remote beach with no friends, no relationships, never seeing your family, and definitely not dealing with a decade's worth of trauma?
The context of this scene is missing. This isn't Jun saying she's better than the Hulk. This is Jun saying she doesn't want his life. She would rather have a prolific career than be a superhero. That's what they're arguing about, not about I'm better than you.
And overemphasizes her own status as a female victim all the time.
I mean, she did go through a life-changing event, so.
So our new heroine is rude, condescending, and has a superiority complex with no setups or payoffs for any redemption arc.
First of all, you don't have a setup and payoff that happens in the first episode. A payoff is something that happens later. Second, why would you need your main character to have a redemption arc on the first episode of the show? Also, where are you getting her being rude and condescending from? She does what Bruce asks her to do. I mean, if your life changed in the blink of an eye and your cousin tells you that from now on you have to live the life of a hermit, would you do that? That's the whole premise of the show. Jun merges being a hero with her day job.
I wonder why the audience doesn't like or connect with her.
If people can't appreciate a woman with her own autonomy who can save herself, then what does that say about them? Hint, the audience this reviewer is alluding to is those guys who post those Disney is failing and gone woke videos. Those guys think Disney is pushing some liberal LGBT woke agenda. Obviously, they're not going to like a show that's starring a woman. Get a grip.
And in later episodes, it only gets worse. Jen shows up to a wedding not to support her friend, but to take attention away from the bride. But it's okay since the bride is clearly a terrible person.
You need more context here. There's a lot of key points missing. I'll get into it some more. But by this point of the show, everyone knows that Jennifer Walters is She-Hulk, so why wouldn't she go to a wedding as She-Hulk?
Do you think you could help me, clean some stuff up around here, straighten up, take up some of these empties, tidy up?
And Jen, as it turns out, is a complete pushover. Wait, are we sure this woman is a successful lawyer, but she can't stand up for herself when she's repeatedly mistreated at a wedding?
Lawyers can be pushovers. It's called character depth. We're also just skipping over a lot of context and nuance, but whatever. I guess that doesn't matter. Also, doesn't Jen being a pushover this episode contradict her being, quote, dismissive, self-obsessed, and immature? Interesting. Also, I just want to add, since we're avoiding what actually happens in the episode for some reason, that the woman who was getting married asks Jen to not use her She-Hulk powers this episode, which shows Jen being a caring and thoughtful individual. She only resorts to using her powers when the villain of the show starts physically assaulting her. But who even cares about context? Am I right?
And that's the second reason for why the show is so goddamn awful.
What was the first reason? I swear I'm paying attention.
What the hell are these female characters?
Just generic characters. They're not all going to be good people, honestly.
You're telling me, in a show made in 2022, with a diverse set of writers, the best these women could come up with were these terrible characters?
There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, there are other women in the show. Notice she doesn't bring up the paralegal who is one of the best characters in the show. Second, two of these characters are technically villains. The bride on the right, for example, the only reason she even invited Jen to her wedding was so she could brag about getting married. Also, the woman on the left, the lawyer, she isn't as one-dimensional as you're making her out to be. We'll talk more about her in a second. Last, the woman in the middle is literally a villain in this show. Do with that what you will.
These women are all obsessed with each other's clothes.
You need to dress like you respect yourself and not like a football player pleading no contest to a DUI. Nikki? You obviously spend a lot of time thinking about what you're gonna wear. Why don't you help Walters with her look?
Again, we're missing context here. I'm not sure what scene and episode this was taken from, but let's listen again to what she's saying again.
You need to dress like you respect yourself and not like a football player pleading no contest to a DUI.
So she's saying you need to dress like you respect yourself. And your takeaway from that is that women do be liking clothes. You know, when people make the argument that media literacy is dead, I find it true in most cases. Also, why would you pick that as the example of women do be liking clothes and not Jen getting a dress made for her for an event?
Putting each other down or showing each other up.
I don't want to keep repeating myself, but that character is a fucking villain in this show. She antagonizes Jen because she hates her and is envious of her. What part of that is not clicking?
Or generally just being drunk idiots.
I like that your only example of characters being drunk idiots is the stuck side character whose only role in the show is being a drunk idiot as a throwaway gag. And even then, she gets redemption when her and Wong become friends by the series finale. Also, I feel the need to point out that this show has mature themes in it, and drinking is a normal part of everyday life for a lot of people. How many shows do you watch where someone will pour themselves a drink? Speaking of, in the first episode, Bruce tells Jen that as a hope they have a higher threshold for getting drunk. Which would make that a setup and payoff, wouldn't it?
And the less said about that Megan Thee Stallion scene, the better.
Little anecdote here, I actually missed this scene the first time I watched the Megan Thee Stallion episode. As it turns out, the twerking scene was a 10-second blip that airs after the episode ends in one of those infamous end credits scenes. You can skip it entirely. Even at that, it's two women dancing and having fun for all of 10 seconds. I genuinely don't see why people were so upset with it.
This right here is the face of modern feminism.
Wouldn't She-Hulk literally be a feminist? What's your point?
And I'm sure the writers would love to blame all this embarrassing female behavior on their favorite scapegoats, men.
Oh, so you didn't have any point. Embarrassing female behavior. It's a 10-second throwaway gag. Get a grip, dude.
And that's reason number 3.
Hey, you smell nice. Oh, thanks. It's Scentbird.
This is why I made the video, by the way. Let me just play something here real quick.
Some of my favorite YouTubers have promoted a brand that normally wouldn't show up on my scam/problematic radar scanner.
Scentbird.
Scentbird is a perfume subscription company that at least outwardly looks successful. It's not an MLM, it's not promising to cure cancer, so why do I care? It's because the CEO of Scentbird, Maria Nurislamova, stinks.
Our bodies choose to miscarry children. It's not an accident that happens, it's a choice. If people were to align with their life purpose, we would see a lot less cancer on planet Earth. You could heal yourself from any disease. I don't care if it's cancer. I don't care if it's AIDS. It could be whatever. But you could heal yourself in the span of under 7 days.
We're going to talk about the spiritual reasons for being overweight.
Like, look at Hitler. He's one of the poster children for like being an evil person. Do you know how many millions of souls benefited from learning from the experience that he has created? So is he evil? Not really.
Wait, who are you talking to? Oh, nothing. It's Scentbird. It's a subscription service where you get to choose a new perfume every month from more than 600 options, including brands like Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana. Actually, it's pronounced Dolce & Gabbana, and Versace. And you know me. The harder the brand to pronounce, the more I'm likely to buy it. And I know what you're gonna say. Service like that, it probably costs like $1,000 a month. No, $1,695. Yeah, I know. And I know what you're gonna ask. Which one's my favorite? I really can't say. It's like choosing between my children. And honestly, over the last few weeks, it's like they've become my children. My 3 very fragrant children. Fine, you twisted my arm. It's Salt Air by Skylar. But don't tell the others. They get jealous. And yes, the packaging, amazing. Just look at this. They come in these great travel packs that lock. So the next time I go anywhere, I can take all 600 perfumes with me just so that I have options. Thank you for asking me all these questions.
Scentbird actually sends out talking points to influencers when they make a video. So they send out a sheet basically that tells the influencer, this is what you're going to make since we sent you a couple fragrances and maybe $100 or maybe $200, who knows? And those talking points are great because in essence you're just shooting a Scentbird commercial for them where they sent you something that probably cost them $5 in terms of the fragrance and shipping, and they get a free commercial out of it because you're just reading off exactly what they want you to, just maybe putting your own tiny twist on it. This is one of the actual talking point sheets that they like to send out to people.
Yeah, I actually gotta go. Oh, so you're gonna go and sign up for Scentbird right now, right? Yeah, I'll do that. That's great. Use my code BAGGAGE to get 55% off your first month.
Now you would probably think that's a pretty good deal. You know, $15, again, not all that much. But when you factor out the cost versus the value of what you're getting, it's a piss poor deal, at least for pretty much everything on their website.
Okay, back to the favorite scapegoat of failed MCU writers, men. And that's reason number 3 for why we should all cancel our Disney Plus membership.
They're also increasing the price of their memberships.
The men on the show are what can be best described as nincompoops.
There are also men in this show who aren't. Daredevil and Juan are good counter-examples that this reviewer will not bring up. Also, Jen's father and Bruce Banner are good characters who I'm willing to bet will not be brought up at all.
Here are our best examples. Meet guy who calls women it.
There's a hot chick over there. I'm gonna go talk to it.
I feel the need to point this out. These kinds of guys do exist in real life. Not all men are Matt Murdock, unfortunately.
Meet guy who doesn't care about a woman's career.
This guy in particular is an example of a bad date. I feel like that context is important.
Meet guy who expects the woman to pay.
That is actually the same guy. And again, this is a bad date. It's supposed to be bad on purpose because the whole point of this scene is showing how rough the dating pool is.
Meet guy who calls a woman a specimen.
What a specimen.
This character in particular, spoilers I guess, forms a whole community of internet trolls to antagonize She-Hulk. He creates Intelligenza, which in the comics its members included Claw, Red She-Hulk, Leader, Monarch, Egghead, and Wizard. I'm going to be honest here. Red She-Hulk might be one of the laziest villain concepts I've ever seen. Like, let's just paint She-Hulk red and call that a new character.
Meet guy who would literally rather die than have a difficult conversation with a woman. Meet guy who doesn't understand the definition of alone.
Again, that is the same character. I don't know if I made this point before, but the point of this show is to be entertaining. That doesn't mean that every character in this show has to be a good character. And I don't mean good in the sense that they're written well. I mean good in the literal sense of whether they're good or evil. Since the reviewer here can only process character interactions through one scope, nuance and subtlety is completely thrown out the window for this review.
The one guy that isn't terrible on the show is named Pug.
I told you all she was not going to bring up Jen's dad.
Wonder where his leash is, because he's a harmless little lapdog, clearly.
He is an actual character from the comics. He helped Spider-Man settle a lawsuit against J. Jonah Jameson. The comic story involving this character is a hot mess, involving love spells and a character named Star Fox.
And to be fair, they did treat Daredevil quite well on the show, but I suspect that was because the execs were insistent on how his character is represented.
Daredevil was written well in the show, but only because the writers wrote him well. Really great argument there. Also, I don't know how great he was written since he does the walk of shame after spending a night with John. I still like the character, but when I see a spade, I'm gonna call it a spade.
Have to protect the next Marvel project, am I right?
Daredevil's Disney Plus show, what they originally shot was completely scrapped and reshot. Also, wouldn't you want your characters to be written well and consistently? Is that a Disney-only concern?
But it's clear that this is how the writers view men.
You only gave 3 examples of guys who were intentionally written badly. 2 of which were bad dates. The other character was someone who needed defense attorneys. In my opinion, Puck and Daredevil were actually written pretty well. I also liked Jen's boss Holloway. He was a hard-ass but always kept John in check. Luke was also a good character in the show. as well as Wong and Cousin Ched. But none of that matters because it doesn't fit squarely into the all men were written as stereotypes argument, which they weren't.
As chauvinistic, narcissistic, dismissive idiots who are really only interested in sex or Jen's blood.
Come, Miss Cuz. This is a job for She-Hulk.
Hey, babe. You got a phone number?
I'm way out of your area code, babe.
And I guess the first part is okay since Jen is only interested in sex too, but that blood thing, not cool.
Okay, but why would they even want her blood? Is there some kind of plot reason they could possibly want her blood? Why, who cares? I forgot.
Oh God, please stop. Please make this stop. Please. Dear God.
Oh God, please. Make the attractive 6-foot-tall babe stop having implied relations with men. Please make it stop. Oh, the inhumanity. It's funny cause the robot voice I'm using for this has more depth and emotion than the reviewer.
Which is why we need to move on to reason number 4 for why I will be rubbing my eyes and ears with bleach.
Hey boys, am I in the I hate strong females club too? I made a bleach joke. Can I be one of you guys?
The general utter disdain for the audience.
I didn't read any of that when I watched the show. Then again, I was able to actually follow what was happening in the plot as it was happening, so I might be the outlier here.
So much of the show is written as a preemptive strike against its expected critics.
By so much of the show, like 2 or 3 scenes. I mean, they even changed the ending in a fourth wall break because She-Hulk herself thinks that plot line is stupid. But go off, I guess. Also, I love the fact that some people cannot handle being parodied in a TV show. Like, yes, they're making fun of fragile men in this show at points. It's funny. They also make fun of the drunk bimbo type too, but you don't see women complaining about that. Mainly because they probably didn't watch this show. It got pretty low ratings.
Since the main villain of the show is a group of male incels that are angry that a woman can be a Hulk.
The main villain of this show was Titania. The Intelligentsia guys were a subplot that was set up for the introduction of Intelligentsia into the overarching MCU. In the comics, Intelligentsia is a group of supervillains who are some of the most intelligent minds in the Marvel Universe. Believe it or not, a lot of things that are introduced in the Marvel Disney Plus shows/ movies are there to establish them for future projects. Like Riri being introduced in Black Panther 2, she's Iron Man's eventual successor, and Speedy and Wiccan being introduced in WandaVision. Wiccan becomes the Scarlet Witch's successor in the comics and eventually becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. And then there's also from WandaVision Monica Rambeau, who becomes a hero in her own right in the Marvels. WandaVision actually introduced a lot of things, like the Darkhold, Wanda's children like I mentioned earlier, Sword which is an offshoot of S.H.I.E.L.D. It also introduced mutants to the MCU. Before I think Wanda and Quicksilver were basically Inhumans, Disney could not legally call them mutants for obvious reasons.
But also a successful lawyer, with a good butt, I guess. At least that's how the show creators think about the reason for all the hate that She-Hulk has received and will continue to receive.
I think the She-Hulk hate has died down by now. If anything, people are rediscovering this show like me and wondering why it got so much hate in the first place. In my experience, I was able to binge it in a couple of days. It honestly wasn't that bad.
But I am the show creator's worst nightmare.
Someone who's sponsored by a brand ran by a delusional millionaire in a cult.
I am a woman, and I am also a woman of color. Thankfully, it's not green, and I too did not like the show.
I probably should have flipped the screen capture back around for this. But how are you their worst nightmare when you're technically not even the target demographic? Have you ever considered the fact that you personally are not even in the showrunner's thoughts?
She-Hulk was clearly a successful comic book.
That depends on what you mean by successful. All of her comic series have been canceled. Which I want to point out is fair to say for any hero, seeing how the industry is now pushing for shorter runs of series hoping to entice new readers with constant new #1 issues. She-Hulk's latest series ended this year, spanning 15 issues. Compare that to the Amazing Spider-Man whose run lasted for 664 issues from 1963 to 2018. Even in She-Hulk's original run in the 80s, it lasted 60 issues long. I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest.
A thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated female hero in a medium that generally attracts male readership.
I don't know how true this is. There are reviews calling the latest series, She-Hulk, had not great. They focus too much on her relationship with Jack of Hearts, and that the issues are dull and cliché. Also, a lot of people don't even read comic books, let alone men. I found that in 2018, the data in this chart shows that 2% of adults read comic books every day. And I found in this 2023 article that 2 in 5 children enjoy reading in their free time, and that same 40% of children enjoy reading comics and graphic novels at least once a month. I can't seem to find a reliable answer if the industry is doing okay though. However, I'm getting mixed reviews, from one source saying they're doing okay to another saying they're not. I don't know. I personally don't read comic books, so don't know the state of the industry, and neither does Google apparently.
And yet, the comic did well.
I honestly can't say whether it sold well or not, because the only source for numbers I could find was a webzine called Comic-Con, and I don't really understand the figures, but I'll try. According to this site, She-Hulk issue number 1 sold around 33,000 units, projecting around 94,000 in sales. Compared to its contemporary Scorch, which honest to God I don't know what the fuck that even is, however, it sold 250,000 units, projecting about 250,000 in sales. I don't understand how the units match for Scorched, but for She-Hulk the 33,000 is tripled in projected income, especially since Scorched is $2 more per issue. But I digress.
So why did the creators feel the need to assume that men were going to hate She-Hulk?
I think it's fair to say that they didn't think most men would hate it. They very specifically poke fun at a certain type of person, who could be characterized as incels, which is not all men. They're really only parodying the type of men who make the Disney Marvel is woke and I'm boycotting videos on YouTube, and the subsequent people who watch those videos religiously, not as satire but as gospel.
I mean, they weren't wrong. A lot of people and a lot of men hate the show. And is it any wonder?
Yes, if you can't laugh at yourself or a show poking fun at a stereotype, then you're the type of person who can't enjoy anything in life. I mean, people watch The Boys on Amazon and don't care that it's making fun of the people who watch it. It took them 4 seasons to realize that though, and now they're turning on it because of woke.
The men on the show are absolute reprehensible examples of masculinity.
That character in this still here. His name is literally the Abomination. But continue.
And it's clear that the writers are all aching to put them in their place.
But they don't. The toxic men in the show don't even get that finale. She-Hulk herself skips over that in a 4th wall break and just cuts to the ending. I mean, there's even side villains who go to a retreat and work on their issues in one of the episodes. But does that matter at all to this conversation? No. There's also a character called Dennis who gets swindled out of money, and what does the show do to him? It has a lawyer represent him and get his money back. But does that suit the narrative this reviewer is trying to paint of the show being misandrist? Not really. We're also completely glossing over characters like Luke, who is a designer and makes superhero costumes and is a well-written character in the show. But who cares about that, not when we have an agenda to push?
And prove to them that women are superior.
But that's not even the note that the show ends on. The show ends with Jean asking if Daredevil can be in the finale because she liked him so much.
So why would men enjoy the show when it's clear that the writers think so ill of them?
Why would men enjoy the show when it's making fun of a small percentage of people who can't take a tiny bit of criticism?
The character of She-Hulk was not really treated with respect as a proper character with edges and shadows, but rather as a caricature turned into a dark fantasy for the writers to repeatedly dunk on men.
So the only reason you don't think they treated the character of She-Hulk well was because she, quote, dunks on men. You know, in her own comics she does this. If anything, she's one of the more accurate depictions of a Marvel character. She does actually love being She-Hulk more than being Jennifer Walters. In the comics, she almost never reverts back to being plain old Jen after her transformation. She loves the power and confidence that being She-Hulk gives her, which the show illustrates in stride. I also want to add a counterpoint here. She doesn't really even dunk on men much throughout the show. She defends herself when a group of men ambush her. She helps her co-worker with a testimony when he sues a woman for impersonating Megan Thee Stallion. She defends the abomination in court as his defense attorney and gets him out of jail. She actually goes on dates with a lot of those guys who feel the need to personally vindicate and vouch for. I mean, the show even redeems a character that assaulted her in the first episode.
And then they turned around and complained that the men refused to lay down and take it.
I don't know if the writers ever said stuff like that, and you certainly didn't add any sources to back this claim up. All I will say though, is that this show makes jokes about women as well and expects you to be able to laugh at it. It does not take itself too seriously, and if you can't take a joke, then maybe watching a comedy is too much for you.
And that any women that dislike the show are clearly criticizing it because of their internalized misogyny.
Again, cite a source. Plenty of men and women didn't like this show after it aired. You have the right to not like a show. Not everything that comes out has to be the best thing ever made for it to be watchable. This mentality people have developed about television series is insane. Back in the day, we used to watch comedies like Full House, which would have maybe one good joke if that every episode. But that shit aired for 10 seasons even though the writing was lackluster, and most of the material didn't land. But nowadays, if you have one mid-show that comes out, it's the worst thing ever made and blah blah blah. It's just not that serious.
And their desire to see women fail.
I think you lost the plot here.
And fine, I'm sure people will lump me into that category, but I suggest the writers look at their work honestly.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a comedy. They wrote some jokes and silly stories for Disney to air on Thursdays. It's just not that fucking serious. You know how crazy it is that a show like She-Hulk even exists. At least you got a good TV show. Try being a fan of The Flash.
Did this show really offer any sort of compelling story?
It didn't have to. It's a comedy. That's like asking if It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia should still be on the air if they've never won awards or don't take themselves seriously in the genre. This argument is stupid. Most of these Disney Plus shows are throwaways anyways. And you know, honestly, they're better made than DC's CW shows.
After Jen refuses to become a superhero, calling the Avengers narcissists.
That is for billionaires and narcissists and adult orphans for some reason.
I think that line specifically was only about Tony Stark, who is an adult orphan, billionaire, and narcissist.
Yeah, big man in a suit of armor. Take that off, what are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
It's amazing that the rest of the show is about her dating life, her name, and her struggles with acquiring clothing.
Yeah, it's amazing that the show is about She-Hulk. It should be about Daredevil.
And yet, she views the willingness to serve people and the world as narcissistic.
No, she does not. She views Avengers like Tony Stark as narcs, who at one point in time was. Let's just be honest here, he was. When it came to her cousin or Captain America, she views them as good people who saved the world. All she wanted was to live her life as a lawyer, which is her career profession. I don't know how that translates to being a narc though, if I'm being honest. There are some characters in comic books that have powers and don't use them. Examples such as Dazzler, who prefers being a singer to being a superhero, or Jessica Jones, who instead of being a superhero is a private detective. Similar to the question, I guess, but a lot less paranoid. Similar in being a PI, not in any way personality-wise.
Jen experiences no growth through the show. Instead, she remains flat and uninteresting.
Actually, that's not true. There's one episode where she gets ghosted by a guy who was not ever mentioned in this video. Gee, I wonder why. And she learns to let go and move on. Not on her own either. She goes to a little group therapy session with a bunch of villains, and they help her see the beauty of not just being She-Hulk, but herself. It's funny that episode isn't mentioned at all in this review. I wonder why.
Achieving her happy ending by speaking to the manager and making sure everyone is arrested.
The Abomination got arrested because he broke his parole, and that guy in the screen grab got arrested because he stole Jen's blood and threatened, harassed, and plotted to actually murder her. She was planning on suing him after he made those actual threats to her. It's almost like there was setup and payoff that gets completely ignored in this review.
But the final and most crucial reason for the failure of this show is the worldview the writers and creators have laid out in front of us. There is nothing heroic, nothing aspiring or inspiring. Instead, it's actually pretty bleak, since the men are tools and the women are vapid.
I don't know who you're trying to impress with this dishonest review, but it ain't me. And the guys you're trying to cater to wouldn't even acknowledge your existence. Not all of the men in this show are shown negatively. Even the ones that are shown in a negative light get redemption. I mean, a plot point of one whole episode was She-Hulk getting Abomination out of jail, and he's arguably the most toxic guy in the show, no pun intended. Why don't you talk about her representing Abomination as a client, even though it's a conflict of interest seeing how he is a villain to her cousin the Hulk, but he tells her it's fine and that he doesn't care? Or how her dad loves and supports her the most and is still very much a traditional father figure to her? Or how a group of characters in the first episode have group therapy sessions later on in the season and learn to let go of their hate and anger? We barely even touched on Daredevil, who is the biggest counterargument to this whole video because he's treated perfectly by the writers. They even make a joke at his expense when he does the walk of shame leaving Jen's apartment. It's played for laughs, and it works. The Daredevil episode is a good episode. Honestly, this show is not that bad. I would watch it again if I wanted something feel-good to watch and was bored. There, I said it.
And it's clearly how the writers truly think about the world we live in.
They think She-Hulk and heroes and villains are real. Like, be serious, dude.
Which is why instead of creating content that inspires, they've created something that is 9 episodes of constant finger-wagging at men.
I didn't realize every TV show that was made today had to be inspirational and had to appraise men to the highest of standards. Making jokes is not for the weak of heart, apparently.
And you know what? It could have at least worked out if it was even a little bit funny.
Come on!
Gotcha.
Whoa, 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 Jen.
Matt? Wait, do you pretend to be blind, man? Because that is really problematic.
No, I'm blind. Relax. I have a spatial method that I use to see.
Oh, like echolocation?
Yeah, kind of. It's, I basically have really good hearing. Or at least, I did.
Wait, why were you attacking my client?
Leapfrog is the bad guy here. He kidnapped Luke Jacobson. He's holding him hostage.
Why didn't you tell me that before we fought?
Why didn't you ask me before immediately trying to whoop my ass?
I'm sorry that I assumed the guy dressed as the devil was the bad one.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So, are you like a superhero? Like the Gold Devil?
I'm Daredevil.
Well, just very daring to use ketchup and mustard as your color scheme.
How about I tell Luke you said that?
No, please don't.
Okay. Well, if you're done making fun, I need to save my client from your client.
Okay, yeah, let's go.
You ever destroyed a parking lot before?
Oh, crap.
But turns out it was about as funny as a lecture on intersectional feminism.
You're gonna end it on that. That wasn't even a good joke.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
That's it. You barely even talked about the show. All you said was it was bad because it made fun of people. Comedies do that. They make fun of people because they are comedies. You didn't even talk about Nikki at all, or any of the positives of the show, or the ending subverting expectations. I wasn't really expecting an episode-by-episode breakdown, but this review was kind of bad and dishonest. All of the She-Hulk reviews are like this. This isn't the outlier. You know, now that I think about it, you didn't even mention the CG or how bad it looked even though they spent most of the budget of the show on it. You didn't talk about the music choices being generic, the set design, nothing. As for my review, it's an okay show. If you're bored and want something to watch that's 9 episodes long, and you don't take it too seriously, then I recommend. If not, then whatever. I'm out of the loop on what's good on streaming now. Maybe I'll watch The Acolyte. Apparently there's witches in it or something. I don't know.